Welcome to another edition of Take 5. It's really early in the morning, but anyway, I'm going to try to get this done. We're in John chapter 19, verse 5. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." So if you were with me last time, you know that Jesus has been on trial before Pilate. Pilate really can't find anything wrong with him, but he puts him out there in front of the people wearing that crown of thorns, wearing the purple robe that the soldiers put on him. And he just tells the people, "Behold the man." In other words, take a look at this. Take a look at what you've done, I think is what he's trying to say. You know, you've done enough to him, is what Pilate, I think, is trying to get across. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, verse 6 here, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." Alright, now Pilate was saying, "Look, I'm not going to do this thing. You want to crucify him, that's going to be on your hands." Alright, but unfortunately for Pilate, see, Pilate, you'd have to do a little research on Pilate to understand he was really in a pickle. Politically, he'd gotten himself in a pretty bad jam, and he couldn't really afford to have a major riot going on there. So the Jews were not allowed to crucify anybody. The death sentence could only be carried out by Romans. So that's why we see the next verse. Verse 7, the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." Alright, now, I'm not sure what law that is, except they're trying to say that he's blaspheming, but if he really is the Son of God, it's not blasphemy, is it? Verse 8, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. Yeah, what if he is the Son of God? That makes Pilate more afraid. And Pilate just didn't want to deal with stuff about God and religion. Verse 9, he entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Alright. Pilate asked, "Where are you from?" He wanted to see what Jesus is going to say, if Jesus is going to admit he's from God. And Jesus doesn't respond. And Pilate says, "Listen, I could release you, or I could have you crucified. You better start talking." But notice what Jesus says in verse 11. Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." Jesus is saying that any authority Pilate has came from God. And we got to remember that, guys. If we see something unjust, if we see a king, a president, a ruler of some kind doing something we don't think is right, well, they have that authority from God. God's still in control of the whole thing. But what Jesus also says, look, the ones that handed me over to you, they're guilty of a greater sin. Okay? Jesus kind of knew Pilate was in a pickle. Now, Pilate didn't handle it right, but the fact is, Pilate didn't really want to have Jesus crucified. The other folks did. So Jesus said that's a greater sin. There are different levels of sin. The one that wanted Jesus killed, that's a sin. Verse 12, from then on Pilate sought to release him. See, Pilate trying to let him go. But the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." Alright, now, Caesar is Pilate's boss. So these guys are playing the Caesar card. They're saying, look, if you let this guy go, this guy's claiming to be a king. In other words, this guy's claiming to be what Caesar is. So if you let this guy go, he's just as good as Caesar, and you're letting somebody go that's opposing Caesar. They really try to trip Pilate up here. Really try to put him in a box, put him in a quandary. The thing is, the Jews didn't even care about Caesar. They didn't like Caesar at all. They were just talking just for political reasons here to try to get Jesus crucified. Alright, we're going to stop right there. We'll be back in verse 12 or verse 13. We're dealing with the crucifixion of Jesus. Thank you for watching this edition of Take 5.